Let's forget all of the talk about nuclear war for a minute. It's a distraction from the real world war that's deeply underway. It's happening right before our eyes. Just look at what NATO did this weekend. They blew up the bridge to Crimea. NATO attacked Russia. Of course, they said it was the Ukrainians, right? But Ukrainians are just a proxy for NATO at this point. They'll tell you anything short of nuclear war is a win for everyone. Look, we avoided nuclear war. So you won't see what's really happening underneath. More on that in a minute. But first, something happened this week that you might not have caught if you're busy watching mainstream media like CNN. Vladimir Putin turned 70 years old on Friday, and the mainstream media used it as an opportunity to talk about how deranged he is, how he's hiding out in a bunker, how his friends are disappearing, how China is set to abandon him. Yes, that last ridiculous part is the part I want to focus on because it sets the stage for how this World War III is currently unfolding before our eyes. So if you're in Europe, Australia, the United States, Canada, you're only receiving propaganda news, propaganda media. You're not hearing the true story. What you're hearing is that China is running away from Putin. Make no mistake about it, World War III is already unfolding right before our eyes. And China has been actively and perhaps quietly involved in this war from the very beginning. In fact, years ahead of time. Now, to those paying attention, it's been incredible to watch as this thing unfolds, because it represents the biggest shift in world power since World War II. Now, a little historical context here, because in 2014, China was just starting to court Russia in a bigger way. The relationship was already strong, but nothing like it is right now. And in 2014, when Russia annexed Crimea, in a very telling moment, the Chinese didn't condemn it. No, in fact, at the United Nations, the Chinese delegation abstained from voting. We're going to sit this vote out, a clear sign that they supported Russia's annexation of Crimea while being a little cautious, maybe publicly. China had invested a lot of money in the deep water port in Ukraine, which was now then by all standards up in the air, right? Who is going to support this deep water port? Will it be Ukraine or will it be Russia? They don't know. China had a lot of money invested. So when they solidified their relationship with Russia, the Chinese were solidifying their economic future as well. Now, if you're China in 2014 and you watch NATO install a puppet government in Ukraine that threatens Russia, are you going to support the NATO side or are you going to support the Russian side? Of course, if you're China, you're going to side with Russia. A massive amount of their Belt and Road Initiative relied and currently relies on Russia. That was the start of this alliance in a much bigger way. Now, the sanctions the West placed on Russia after the annexation of Crimea allowed the partnership to flourish. Russia moved away from Western economic interests and shifted to China, India, South Africa, Brazil, and of course, all of the BRICS nations.
You know, every year there's a BRICS summit and every year somebody predicts its demise. Having said that, these countries have still stuck together for longer than anybody had predicted.
Then 8 years later, war broke out. And during those 8 years, Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping have solidified their partnership. Don't believe me? Just look at what happened this weekend. NATO launches an attack on Crimea, blowing up the Crimean bridge. The United States says, hey, we don't care. Russia started this war, so we're not going to say anything about it. China condemns the attack and stands by Russia. These battle lines, my friends, are drawn. We're watching it play out. In 2014, China was dependent on Russia for trade of precious minerals, but the finances weren't at the forefront. And then 8 years later, finances and trade are now deeply intertwined. Now, the financial piece has grown tremendously, and their currencies are in many ways intertwined deeply now. The West is trying to pretend that China is running in the opposite direction because the West is desperate. And these are the actions of a desperate child. You know, when a child throws a temper tantrum and starts crying and throwing things? Yeah, like blowing up a pipeline or blowing up the biggest bridge to Crimea. Yeah, those are all clear signs of a desperate power. Now, of course, this all comes down to money and power, and the West is getting desperate watching it all slip away right in front of them. The dominance of the US dollar as the world's reserve currency is dying, and they know it. The United States blew up the Nord Stream pipeline in order to stop Europe from advancing. Now, Germany will need to buy American natural gas. Almost immediately, this was a stunning piece of news. The United States started price gouging the Germans. That's right. charging astronomical prices for natural gas. Oh, you don't have that pipeline that we blew up anymore to get cheaper natural gas from Russia? How about you buy our American natural gas and you pay through the nose for it? It's a brilliant business move. The United States is desperate because the economy is unsustainable. The US dollar isn't tied to any precious metal like it is in Russia and China. This week, the United States announced that it's now $31 trillion in debt. Now, just to wrap your heads around that for a moment. I remember being in high school in the 1990s and my history teacher, Mr. Vogt, shout out to Mr. Vogt, he was telling us how the national debt at the time was around 3 to 4 trillion. If memory serves, it was like 3 to 4 trillion. At the time, my teacher made the case that there's virtually no way for the United States to be able to pay that back, right? Because we're paying so much on the interest alone. That was 3 to 4 trillion dollars. Now it's at 31 trillion. And a huge percentage of that debt is to China. So who is in the driver's seat here? In the 8 years since NATO installed a puppet government in Ukraine, the Chinese and Russians have been moving towards a joint BRICS currency backed by gold, silver, and other commodities. In fact, the ruble, the Russian ruble, is the closest currency we have in the world to being backed by gold as part of the gold standard. Meanwhile, the United States has been moving further into a debt-based currency. The United States dollar is not backed by anything. It's not backed by gold. In fact, it is backed by debt. Debt, debt, debt. The West is lying to you, trying to tell you that Putin is hiding in a bunker and that Russia wants nothing to do with Mad Vlad. I've seen that headline a couple of times. Mad Vlad is in a bunker. Everyone's leaving him, ditching him. It's just propaganda. And the real world war is about money and global trade dominance. Would you rather have your family's finances tied to a country with $31 trillion in debt or an economic alliance backed by gold, silver, and other precious minerals? That's why we're partnering with Prismo Metals for this video. Now, we're headed for a massive recession and a massive stock market correction in the Western countries. This is Brandon Smith writing at Zero Hedge. I want to quote what he just wrote this morning. He says, quote, "I have said it many times in the past, but I'll say it here again. Stock markets are a trailing indicator of economic health, not a leading indicator. Rising stock prices are not a signal of future economic stability, and when stocks fall, it's usually after years of declines in other sectors of the financial system. Collapsing stocks are not the cause of an economic crisis. They are just a delayed symptom of a crisis that was always there." And of course, you're seeing that in so many sectors of the economy with mass layoffs, right? And so certain sectors in the stock market now are collapsing for a reason. The reason we're seeing this collapse is because the patient is dying. That means if your 401k is tied to these types of companies, I mean, look, Peloton trying to save itself right now. Facebook, Meta, whatever you want to call it, laying off thousands of people. Banks laying off tons and tons of people. Again, if your 401k is tied to these companies in these economies, you better get ready. Now, you've heard me talk about how I actively invest in precious metals and precious metals companies like Prismo Metals. Now, there's no doubt that the world is heading towards a precious metals as a store of value and a technological utility standard. That's what it's going to be, right? The demand for silver components is off the charts right now. So we're seeing strengthening of silver and gold prices in the last few days. In fact, I just got an email today from a viewer who's a prepper and said, look, you make sure you buy food, make sure you buy gold, make sure you buy silver, and protect your families as these currencies collapse. Remember, I think investing in these precious metals is a hedge against inflation and a way to protect your family. I agree with this prepper that I heard from. So the company I just mentioned, Prismo Metals, is a junior exploration company that focuses on the acquisition and development of high-grade silver and gold projects in top gold and silver areas. Now, the company is actively exploring in an area in Mexico right now that is underexplored. Prismo currently has 2 exploration projects in Palos Verdes and Los Pavitos. Palos Verdes is located in the famous Panuco Silver Gold District in northwestern Mexico, and it's surrounded by another company. So another bigger silver company is already actively there, which is great news for the smaller company that's nearby, which is Prismo. So this other company is Vizsla, which is a silver company. VZLA is what their ticker is. They recently made discoveries in the same area. Their company trades at $250 million in market cap. Now, Prismo is currently drilling this project, and this campaign is expected to last about 2.5 months. It's designed to test the Palos Verdes vein for silver, and it's right nearby VZLA. So the results for this first batch of samples are expected to be out very, very soon. So I'm definitely going to be keeping a close eye on what these guys pull out of the ground. I read these newsletters and I study what these guys do. And since the other big boy company, Vizsla, as I just told you about, they continue to build out its presence in this area, it only makes sense that Prismo is in the right place at the right time, right nearby. Prismo Metals is currently trading at 22 cents as of this morning, 22 cents a share. So this is in the lower section right now of its 52-week range between 12 cents and 42 cents. So kind of right in the middle of that. So this offers a significant amount of upside given any developments in their projects right now. So if they strike it rich, they hit silver, they hit gold, of course, that share price is going to skyrocket. The current market capitalization is just over 5.4 million, and there's no denying the massive discount that's currently in effect with gold and silver prices right now. They are selling at a discount from where the price targets are. For example, gold, we're seeing price targets of $2,500 an ounce. So 22 cents a share. I would be surprised if that lasts much longer should Prismo continue to deliver such great drilling results from these projects in Mexico. So again, their news release, here's just an example from September 11th. Take a look at this. It says they've intercepted several vein structures, followed by pictures of what looks like promising mineralization. So these are all great signs for drilling in this area and being able to pull silver from these particular mines. Something else to mention here from my research is that what makes this company stand out is the management team. Is they're willing to put their money where their mouth is. Now, unlike most junior exploration companies where management gets cheap stock in these early rounds of investment and then they later let investors take all the risk, management at PRIZ have financed the company using close to $700,000 of their own money in June to finance the company's needs. So I always look for companies where the owners invest in the company. So again, do your own due diligence on this company, Prismo Metals. I'll put their ticker here on the screen. That's both the Canadian ticker and the US over-the-counter ticker right here on your screen. I'll also have a link in the description below so you can read their latest gold and silver reports. Again, do your own due diligence, making sure that you're protecting your family by having assets that are performing and are a hedge against inflation, guys. Now more than ever. Making sure that you're stocking up on foodstuffs and food stores and actually having tangible assets like gold and silver and investments in companies that are pulling these things out of the ground. We'll see you next time, everyone.